welcome to Riffs TV. My name is Jason JROCK Houston. We're speaking with Steve Pfister. Steve, many people know you like myself. I first learned of you probably back in 1988 when you were playing with
12
Lita.
years old.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. How did you get that gig? And did you play on the album, or were you just in the touring band? I can't remember.
Well, before that, my first gig prior to Lita Ford was with, I played club bands forever.
Okay.
But there came a time where I just said, I'm not going to do any more clubs. I'm just going to play in national acts. And I got a call from a very good friend of mine who's playing in an incarnation of the Iron Butterfly.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So next thing you know, I'm out on the road and we're playing with Savoy Brown and Mountain and Grand Funk Railroad. And I'm just a kid, and I'm hanging out with all my idols and stuff, right?
All the legends, right? Yeah.
It was great. And talk about learn while you earn.
Yeah.
And then when that kind of ceased to be, to be going, then I got a job with Michael DeBars.
Okay, of course, yeah.
And then I started doing a bunch of sessions here in LA for a good friend of mine was a producer at Jet Records. And that was Don Arden's label. And
okay, yeah, Black Sabbath, yeah.
All that stuff, and Gary Moore and all the greatest stuff, So I remember I would see Lita coming in and out of the office every once in a while, and I didn't know her, that kind of thing. It was the kind of thing where then the word went out that she was going to be looking for a guitar player, and then everybody in town was auditioning, and my friend Danny Johnson and Len Campanaro, they were playing in a band called Private Life.
Okay.
Eddie Van Halen produced him. And
okay, I remember that. Yeah.
Between all that stuff, they said they were rehearsing at Third Encore or something here in town, and Lita come in the hallway. She goes, "I'm auditioning guitar players. I can't find anybody I like." And both of those guys, much to their credit, said, "Call Steve. Call Steve. He's the guy. Call Steve." And then between that and the producer from Jet Records saying, give this guy a call. And that's kind of how it happened. I went to the audition and there were still 8 guys waiting to play.
What I love about that story, Steve, is the fact that, like I said at the top interview, like most people, I know you from, your gig with Lita Ford, and you make a very good point that, okay, that may be where you know me from, but there was stuff that came before, and I always love talking to people like you and finding that out. Okay, what did you do before, and what led to this?
Well, it's the thing, the music thing. I mean, how lucky can any of us be these days to say that they were in a big rock band or a famous rock band in the 80s? I mean, we had MTV, we had, there was a lot of stuff. We were on great tours. I was so fortunate to be in Lita's band at the time when, Sharon Osbourne was managing the band.
Sure.
And so we got on all the best tours.
Of course, Lita's the main person in the band, but
of course,
I think of everybody in the band, probably you were the most high-profile band extra. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, at least like what I remember picking up, Circus Magazine and stuff like that at the time, and you'd always see like guitarist Steve Pfister, and
she was so cool. Let me tell you, we were, when I was thinking about us having our chat today, I was thinking about, how really gracious she was to me. It was right at the time where there was, she had tons of interviews to do. There was all sorts of stuff. And we were rehearsing a band like crazy. And she called me one morning and said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be on all these interviews and stuff." She goes, "Would you run the band? Would you do the rehearsals? Would you, do this kind of stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." So I kind of got my band leading chops there together.
There you go.
And of course, we all were all so gun-ho to do everything. And I was really grateful for that. And as far as guitar parts went, she is super generous to me. Yeah. And something, I was thinking about this. If I had more really cool leaders like that, I might have been a sideman for a lot longer than I was.
Yeah.
Because there's a ton of gigs after that as well.
Oh, sure. And that's part of the reason I contacted you, because I was getting on your webpage. And I'm like, I wonder what this guy's been up to since. Quite a bit, as you said. And I don't know that we'll get it all in this one interview, but that's the thing. So I guess the next obvious question, what was the point where, was it out immediately after the tour, or how much longer did you work with Lita, and what was the process
We
for your departure?
It was about 3 years, I mean, from start to finish, because it was a long startup time, before everything got done, before everything started to happen. There was just so much touring and so much stuff to be done. And we went for about 11 months straight that year.
Yeah.
And we toured with Ted Nugent and Poison
Oh, wow.
and Bon Jovi
All the big
and
bands at the
Yngwie
time.
Malmsteen.
As a
What a
guitar
bill.
player, what was that like for you, Yngwie? I mean, he's quite a bit different,
It was we did dates with him, and Ingve was great, because
Yeah, yeah,
everybody go out eating dinner,
yeah.
and right, they'd be in catering, and him and I would play
Oh, cool.
in the dressing room, and he's super nice, and a killer blues player, even
Yeah,
back in the time when nobody thought it. He was great.
yeah. And I don't want to let out any secrets, Steve, but I gotta say, you really don't look your age. I mean, you look like probably as young as you were back then. I mean, I don't know what your secret is. Maybe the music keeps you young, huh?
Well, thank you very much. And of course, like I said, I was 12 years old when I joined her band, but
Practically.
but I don't know. Something. It's the business has changed so much,
I'm sure.
and obviously anybody that stays in
I
it
mean, I mean, one
has
thing
to
that's really
has to love
different
it.
is, back then didn't even have the internet, obviously.
There
You
was
had
no
all
internet.
those great rock mags like I was talking about, Hit Parader and Metal Edge and Circus
Man, I
Mag.
miss that. I
Yeah,
miss that stuff.
yeah,
Remember
yeah.
that when you'd get those magazines and you just go through everything and you just go, "Oh my God, this is great."
The big thing I remember, I mean, I remember 1988 when that Lita album came out, seeing like in Circus Magazine, tell you when the release date and all that was and what the first single was in the video.
Everything,
And,
everything.
were you actually involved with the album, or were you just in the touring band? I couldn't remember.
Touring band,
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so,
and
did you start as the tour would go on? Did you start people? Obviously, people recognize Lita, but were more and more people coming up to you now? Surprised were you?
yeah. I mean, I was luckily enough at the time to get you know little things in Guitar Player magazine, stuff like that, and I had an ad for a string company that was huge, and we get off the plane in Finland, and all the kids would be going, they'd be holding the ad,
Yeah,
and they'd be going, "Oh, Steve Vistos," It was
yeah,
really cool. So that was nice. That was when things weren't quite as saturated as
yeah.
they are now.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, a lot of bands. I mean, you don't even need a record deal. I mean, to even put an album out, a lot of people do it independently, and
Yeah.
there's double side, to that. But so, what was the point when did you decide to leave Lita? Was it just a matter that there wasn't any touring for a while or anything going on?
I got a job offer. I can remember coming back after those 11 months, and I can remember distinctly laying in my bed and pretty much like in a coma. And remember the answer phones back
Yeah.
in the day?
Oh,
The answer
sure.
phone went off, and I got an offer to go play with Steppenwolf, with John
Oh,
Kay and
wow. What
Steppenwolf.
a, oh, wow. Another
And I'm laying
legendary
there and
band. Yeah.
I'm exhausted, and I'm going, So I went down and auditioned, and met John, met the guys, and it was a pretty good fit.
Sure.
And the next morning, I get the phone call. Well, you didn't get the job. We decided to go with this other guy.
Oh, wow.
But thanks for coming down. But
Yeah.
2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, that guy who they picked, who
Didn't
should
work out.
remain nameless, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you anyway. I
Yeah.
don't care. Uh, he wound up in jail. They had a
Okay.
three and a half month tour booked and going.
Yeah. Yeah.
12
Yeah.
people in the crew, the whole bit. I get a call overnight to join the band at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, wow.
So I'm learning tunes on the in the
Yeah.
bus coming down the hill. I don't know if you've ever been to Denver, but you can almost see in that stadium. So we were
Okay.
playing with a ton of bands that day. So it was only like a 50-minute set, which is still pretty daunting. They got all the other guys' gear out there. My stuff was being shipped. I just
Wow.
had guitars, and there's cheat sheets, and I got shit laying around
Yeah. Yeah.
like that. So it was a little trial by fire. So anyway, I did that gig, and I was essentially, whatever. It wasn't my record deal, and
Yeah.
Lita's a
So
solo artist and a great
let's talk
one.
about
So
right the difference between that and the Lita gig. Obviously, like playing with a band like Steppenwolf, Although you were quite young at the time, I'm sure, like a lot of us, you heard a lot of those great Steppenwolf tunes on the radio, over the
Sure
years.
did. I played them in bar bands as a kid,
Yeah. And
you know?
so, talk about that because, joining a big band like that, did you know any of the tunes, or what was the process? How long did it take you to get to the point where you felt, you had the tunes?
I knew the majority of the tunes. Of course,
Yeah.
all the endings and stuff like that. And of course, they had some new songs, and it was a really good experience. I enjoyed it. I wound up doing it for 3 years. I mean, there was a little respite in between,
Yeah.
but we played in we played gigs with Rod Stewart. We
Wow.
played gigs. We played on a bill with Garth Brooks once to like 270,000 people.
Yeah, and the cool thing about
It's
that to
huge.
me, Steve, is like, playing in a band like Steppenwolf, doing shows with Rod Stewart and Garth Brooks, it exposes you to different types of
Sure.
musicians and fans. That's got to be a pretty cool gig, doing a gig with Garth Brooks.
And
Steppenwolf.
Foghat was on that bill too. It was crazy.
But even Foghat's, Foghat, Garth Brooks, and then like the rock bands are kind of getting introduced to the country crowd and vice versa.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
Foghat, I gotta say, I tip my hat to Roger Earl. He's the one remaining original guy from the band, but he's been doing it all these years, and that guy is almost he's in his 70s and he's still beating those drums.
I love Foghat. Always had as a kid. And I saw when I was a huge Savoy Brown fan as a kid.
Yeah.
And then when they turned into Foghat, they were opening on the Beck, Bogart, and the Peace tour.
Oh wow.
And speaking
Yeah,
of,
talk about Beck, Bogart, and a piece. Jeff Beck just tragically um, died, but that album turns 50 years old this year, and from what I understand, Carmine's going to put out like a special box set.
Carmine will put out about. I could send you some stuff. I
Uh-huh.
played on a ton of stuff with him and Tim
Okay.
Bogart. I was going to say that.
Well, we look
I've
forward to
been
that one. Yeah.
really fortunate. I'll send you some of the tracks. I mean, Carmine has them up there, but
Yeah.
whoever's credited, doing them, I did a ton of them. So I did a King Cobra record with him too over the
I
years.
just love to say, I'll say this. I'd love to have you back once that's released, talk more about that. But,
Great.
uh, it's great talking to you right now, Steve, finding out all this stuff. And, getting back to the Lita gig, I was curious because, again, joining up with a band like Steppenwolf, those are, of course, tunes you've heard on the
Hmm.
radio. Um, what was the process like learning the Lita 4 tunes? Because some of those were just off the new album, of course, had just been released. And how much of the older Lita material did you have to learn?
It was like when I went into audition, they said to learn, learn these two songs. I learned 5.
Wow, wow.
So you just learn because you never know. I mean, if you're going to be a sideman, it's not my gig.
Yeah.
It's to serve, the boss, the
Yeah.
person whose creative thing it is, And I don't know. I was always a pretty quick study. I mean, you have to make a living. You have to learn tunes, and there's certain secrets that people use to learn tunes. And I have my own little system. I just love playing guitar and always have.
That's the thing about, you getting these type of gigs because, probably at the time you joined Litas, although, you did the thing with, those other gigs you were telling me about before that, Iron Butterfly and what that, but the cool thing is, like all these years later, you got you have that tag, maybe forever ex Lita 4 guitarist, and I'm sure it's something you're very proud of. But then you got all these other things to talk about too, But a lot of people
after that, there was a year or so gap in there, and I thought, well, okay, because we all know what happened when the '80s were over.
Sure.
What happened to the majority of the players that played in those bands?
Yeah.
And I got a call to play with Stu Ham.
Oh wow. Okay, I heard of it. Yeah.
So I played with Stu, and he had a pretty good record at the time that was doing pretty well, and I did a North American tour with him, and that was I did not play on Stu's record, but he came and played on a bunch of mine in past years, so I'd like to tell you about that. But nonetheless, on Stu's records, there was Eric Johnson, there was Alan Holdsworth, there was Joe Satriani, there was Steve Vai. So wow. Stu said to me, he goes, play the heads, play the melodies, then you can do your thing. And it was the really coolest thing because, you know, when you're playing an arena gig, and I love it, man, the more people, the better. It's a show.
Yeah.
You know, the lights, you got to be standing in this spot, you got to be doing this and that, you know. This was real effing rock and roll music, you know, playing to, you know, a few hundred people at a time.
Yeah.
And we did some gigs. We opened for Joe Walsh. We did a bunch of, you know, playing fusion-y kind of crazy music. And it was just the greatest experience. But then Stu, you know, returned the favor and played on, well, he played on 2 of my records.
Oh, wow.
My solo
See,
records.
That's cool. It's like, you know, what I always say about, you know, going to see a band live is I want to be entertained. If I want to just, you know, listen to the record, I'll stay home. But, and I think you know what I mean there. But, yeah, you know, and a lot of people, let's talk about your, as you mentioned, you put out a number of solo albums. So, are your solo albums, like, do you sing on them? Or are you just strictly instrumental, or?
I'm a singer.
Great, yeah.
No, you know, seriously. I mean, that was the thing. The first 2 records were largely instrumental because that was the days of you know, I like melodic guitar playing. I like, you know, stuff that kind of tells the story without the vocalist. But you know something, in order to tour, I got a deal over in Europe.
Yeah.
And what was really, really obvious, I mean, I had to sing, and I always sang in club bands, but I always wanted to be that guitar guy. I knew that in order to get out there, you had to, you know, you had to sing. So yeah, I you know, you got to check out some of the tracks. Now, come on now, Jay.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was asking is because I did check out some of the solo tracks, but I wasn't sure if you were the one singing. That's why I asked. And the thing with that is like,
if you liked it, it was me. If you didn't like it, it wasn't me.
I liked it. That's why I asked. And see, and the reason I'm asking is when you first started, you know, doing vocal records, was it something you always knew you could do, or you had the ability, or were you surprised? Hey, you know, I got a pretty decent voice, or did people start telling, hey, Steve, you should just sing because you might have a nice voice?
When I was doing this, my second record, and on that record, I had Tommy Aldrich playing drums.
Wow.
And Stu played bass, and we had this great thing. Even Reese Winans even played a Hammond track on there for me. It was just awesome, just fucking great. And we're in the studio, and it sounded so good. It sounded so big. And a big-time manager came in. He was working with an act that was next door at the studio that we were at. And he comes in and listens, and he goes, oh, man. He goes, this sounds really good. He looks at me, and he goes, so where's the singer?
You're looking at him.
And then there wasn't any singing, you know, so we listened, and he goes, well, you know, okay. So I mean, it kind of stuck in my head. The record did pretty well considering, but, you know, I thought, well, okay, if I'm going to keep going, this is the whole thing about reinvention, you know, if you're going to keep going and make a living, and, you know, and not, I'm probably the worst mercenary guy. I'm not a mercenary guy at all. You know, I never did any of this stuff for money. Consequently, you know, but
it just happens to be what you do, right, for a living.
It's what I do, and we know how fast the world is working, that we have to really reinvent, you know.
And truthfully, you got to get every cent you can, if you know what I mean. And this music world being what it is today, I mean, you're lucky when people go to your YouTube, they even play the songs all the way through, you know.
They won't even go all the way through, and you don't get paid for it. You know what I mean? We have to be very, very resourceful. So
I'm having a conversation with somebody the other day, tell me, I don't even buy CDs. I just buy whatever the little latest single is for 99. I'm an old school guy. I love to have CD at least in my hand, something, you know, look at the beautiful artwork. I remember back in the day seeing like Kiss Destroyer, not even knowing what it was really. What the hell is this? This looks so damn cool. I got to have it.
Was that cool? Yeah.
I mean, that's how it was back in the day. You know, there used to be places, folks, called record stores that you could actually go and buy music.
And find out about new acts and see who was doing this. But you know something, it's like, it's like even placement in a record store back in the day. I mean, that was all kind of bought. You know, like
even MTV, people don't realize back in the day. I mean, I remember hearing record companies when they'd be like paying MTV to play their artists and stuff. And yeah. And
a lot of bands that made those, even back then, the Lita videos were 120,000, 150. That's you know, 30 years ago money. That's a lot of money in today's terms, you know, and you have to recoup that money. So the business, you know, is something, you know, and then business is always a thing. It's like my tour, my solo tour, which is canceled, the latest one over this pandemic. 3 times it had to be rescheduled. So every time things get rescheduled, agents aren't particularly happy. I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And it's then you wind up losing one festival. You lose one festival,
Sure.
that's the gravy for the week.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, it's challenging.
You're lucky. I mean, the fact you're getting on big festivals like that says something about your level of talent, and that you got that kind of a fan base. I mean, Wasp, one of those big bands from the 80s, I mean, they just toured for the first time in 10 years, did a great US tour. Now they're touring Europe. And from what I understand, because they hadn't played in the US, the promoters were really nervous. Well, I don't know, they haven't played here in years. And yet almost every show on the tour sold out.
Fantastic.
And now they're doing these big shows in Europe, but they've always kind of, you know, for the last 10 years, they've been doing most of their shows in Europe, just like Mr. Big. They do like 4 shows a year, maybe in Japan, they make bank. Yeah.
That's just it, you know, and it's you know, like I said, you got to be resourceful, you know, like we for the solo band, we got on some really good tours, because I had one record that was number 2, and it was an indie sort of, it was like my second European label.
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell you about the first one, but I'm sure you probably know. Yeah. You know, labels are, you know, they're supposed to be business partners
these days, you know.
We toured with Y&T, and then we did a Joe Satriani tour.
Wow.
And that really moved us up. When I started, the record was like 30, and then it came to be number 2.
Yeah.
So these little things, you know, really, really help. I don't know.
There's a thing with that, Steve, though, like, you know, if you say, oh, I'm on a little indie label, but you know what? Number 2, okay, it's not number 1, but it's number 2. That's not too bad, you know? Especially,
well, you know something, you know, in a lot of this stuff, you know, because it is promotion and money and things, the only thing that beat us was Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and that was at Epic Records, and that's serious cash.
I'll tell you another funny story, like the latest Def Leppard album. I mean, I wouldn't exactly put it up there with Pyromania. It's great though, like you said. And the interesting thing is, it went to number 1. It was number 1 for a week, but by the next week everybody forgot about it. But it went to number 1. It's the number 1 album. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Our fan base is, I guess they're such a great band and so good live.
And what I love about Def Leppard is, you know, people may say, oh, it's not Pyromania, but you know what? They're putting out, I respect the fact they're putting out great new music still. Their bands are just simply living off their catalog of music. And that's the other reason I want to talk to you, Steve. Get to know a little more about, you know, you and your solo career and what you're doing now. And I really love the fact that, like you said, okay, I know you're a guitar player, singer, songwriter, and while you're a great songwriter, and it's a great thing that when you write a song, maybe to give it to somebody else, and they turn your song into, you know, what they do, their magic, so to speak, and that's got to be like a great interpretation. But you feel as a solo artist, you know, I'm sure you could have somebody else that's just a masterful lead singer come in and sing your songs, but you feel that, you know, being that it's a Steve Pfister band, these are songs that you wrote, that maybe you can sing them better, more from the heart since you wrote them, as opposed to having somebody else come in and do it?
That's a really great question. And you know, something is coming kind of age as an artist. You know, it's like, we know anybody that's jumped on the bandwagon of somebody who was, you know, you're always a year or 2 late.
Yeah.
So the basic thing you can do is the real true thing is to be yourself and find that voice. How many musicians can find their voice? I mean, we'll see. We'll go on the internet. We'll see, you know, 6-year-old kids in Korea that play like Eddie Van Halen. You know, but you know, is that kid going to have anything to say? I mean, I suppose it's old school thinking, but that's my thinking. Is that, you know, artistry and commerce don't always mix.
Go with it because it seems to be working for you. And you know, the thing with that is, let's be honest, there are some people that go on American Idol, they think I mean, they think they're really they can really sing, and you know, somebody should maybe tell them they can't. But the fact that, you know, you've got the talent that you can, and nobody's told you, hey Steve, you know, singing sucks, I think you should get some. People are buying the records. The record went to number 2, so I think that says all we need to know. You know.
Well, you know, you're talking about the talent shows, you know. It's like you turn on America's Got Talent, which I won't, by the way, and then you see your FedEx guy singing, and you're going, you know, come on, man, where's the 10,000 hours? You know what I mean?
I mean, there are a few exceptions to that, but I think even American
of course,
Idol,
yes.
I mean, people had gone on to have careers, but the thing with even a show like American Idol,
Right.
why I have more respect for a guy like you is you're in the studio, you're writing, you're creating your own music. People on American Idol typically they'll tell them, okay, we're gonna write the songs for you. We're gonna create what you are,
Yeah.
where you're more true to who and what you are.
Well, thank goodness. And I think this way, I mean, you'll hear two schools of thought. It's like, oh, okay, now that we're by and largely our own business thing. So we're in charge of writing. We're in charge of rehearsing the band. We're in charge of getting the guys. We have to bankroll, the rehearsals. We have to get everybody going. If you're part of a huge machine, kind of a singer, I mean, God, I don't know. It's a whole different thing.
Songwriting is really where the money is, right? I mean, if you have somebody else coming and writing all your songs, you're the talent in.
Used to be. Now the publishing is because the market's so fragmented. You get that big hit record. You're actually doing better off if you get something in a movie. You make a little bit more money.
I mean, I know a lot of the '80s guys. Some of them are doing stuff for TV and soundtracks and stuff, and they make a ton of money.
I was lucky enough to get a couple of songs and some things, in the like Spaceballs and a couple of things, which keep paying.
Yeah, I see that. Let's talk about that. I wasn't aware of it. I mean, Spaceballs. How did that come about?
It's what happened was I got involved with, I did live in Nashville for a couple of years, right when the grunge thing started happening. And I was always kind of a roots guitar player anyway, regardless of the hair and the sound and whatever, it's just image shit,
Yeah, you seem to be one of those guys that can kind of just do whatever,
Well, I would like to think if you hear it, it's me.
Yeah.
But, I mean, because I love playing on other people's records and they need something, I'll be glad to do it. And I have been. And Christ, I just did one this morning. It was much fun.
And the other thing is, being a guitar player, a lot of times, guitar players, okay, a lot of them don't typically think they can sing. So they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to put together a great guitar album. And that's great too. But I think what's different with that is, to me, when you're doing instrumental music, if you're Steve Vai maybe, or Joe Satriani, those guys are great at what they do. It's not like every track on the album sounds exactly the same. They all really stand out, those guys. But I think when you're doing, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think a lot of times when you do instrumental music, it's great if you're a fan of that. But it's more about like a vibe or kind of what your emotion is. Where if you're doing vocal tracks, maybe it's more from the point of telling a story. You're more thinking about what the lyrics mean.
I would totally agree with that. I think, but as far as there's a lot of really wonderful guitar records out these days. But look at the two big guys you were just talking about. That I remember the first time I heard Satch Boogie. I was driving in the car and I had to pull over and they go, "Oh my God, this is incredible! What the hell is this?" Yeah. But you see, that was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's some incredibly great guitar players.
Sure, there is. You just have to find it. Yeah.
But we don't have it. We don't have the kind of medium like we did back then. See, everybody has a computer. Everybody can do it. So there's no more screening.
Yeah.
So who screams the loudest gets noticed.
I find a lot of people to do these interviews with. Like, of course, I was aware of who you were, and so I'm looking for people to interview. And you're one of my friends on Facebook, and came across your Facebook page. Was reading what you're up to now. I'd love to interview Steve and see what he's up to now. And that's the cool thing about the internet. It's easy to look people up like that and find out what they're doing. Now, we didn't have that back in the day, but also, with the internet, I mean, like even back when you were doing shows with Lita, people couldn't go on the internet and find out, okay, what was the set list last night? What are the songs there?
Exactly.
You just had to go to the show and enjoy it.
It was more the myth. Back then, because you didn't really know, who's going to be there, or what's going on here. Now everybody knows everything.
And see, like we've only scratched the surface today talking to you, Steve. I'd love to have you back because you got a great history. You tell great stories, and I've discovered stuff about you that I didn't even know. And so watch this interview. I think they're going to really enjoy that. But I got to tell people, just even going on your webpage. Like you do a great job of telling your history and what you're doing, and it's really up to date.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Something. It's just like so name droppy, But that's what this is for, right? I mean, I don't. That's what we're for. We're supposed to talk about.
Who's going to promote your music better than you?
Well, I've been super fortunate, and thanks for calling me. I appreciate it. I mean, I've always had great people to play, in the bands, and trust me, they never really did it for money because there's never really a whole bunch. So I'm very happy that I've been able to sustain.
Are you like when people come to your shows and they talk to you after after you get off stage, are you surprised to find out like how loyal your fan base is?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm grateful for that, however many, but even in Europe, like we're going once, twice a year. And then there'd be guitar player guys. Next thing you know, they're bringing their kids,
wow.
It's totally cool. Like, oh, here's Steve, this kind of thing. And it's really a great feeling. And that's what I found, the fan base more or less in Europe.
And so, Steve, before I let you go, because we did a great job, I think, of telling a good portion of your story. Like I said, I think we really only scratched the surface. Now, when the box set for Vivek, Bogart, and Apathy, I'd love to have you back talk about that. But before I let you go, bring us up to date. Like, what are you currently working on?
We have an EP that's pretty much in the can. It's done. And with all the touring being postponed, we're going back over. We're going to be in September, October of this year. We're going back over, and we're going to go play rock and roll for everybody, and have a bunch of T-shirts because God knows who's going to be buying records.
Well, Steve, let me know once you're ready to drop that, and we'll have you back, and we'll talk specifically about the new EP and help you promote it. Okay?
It'd be my pleasure.
Take care,
thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome back anytime. It was great talking. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jay. Take care.